Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I hope it's good to be where you are because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and we're going to Hollywood. Okay. So our adventure to Hollywood does not start in California, of course, because why would it start in California? But it starts in England, in Holmfirth. And this is Miss Havisham's most recent video that she took there, and she has some really amazing footage of this old church building here. And it really struck me as to how, like, sort of built into the side of a hill this place is. Right? And was really intrigued by it in the footage that she took. Right? So I wanted to find out more about Holmfirth. And so Holmfirth is a small town within the metropolitan borough of Kirklees, West Yorkshire, England. Right? And it's historically part of West Riding of Yorkshire. Right? Holmfirth was once the center for pioneering filmmaking by Bamforth and Company, which later switched to the production of saucy seaside postcards. And there was a BBC sitcom that was filmed there. Right? And it says here that the name Holmfirth derives from the Old English Holland for holly, right? And is compounded with the Middle English firth for wood. It means Hollywood. And I read that, I was like, wait a minute, what? Didn't I just read that it was a pioneering filmmaking by Bamforth and Company? So I had to find out more about Bamforth and Company. And so it's now in Leeds, I guess, right? And it was started in 1870 by James Bamforth, right? A portrait photographer. And he specialized in 1883, he started making these lantern slides. And in 1898, silent monochrome films. And this story is really kind of interesting. So they make films all the way up through 1819 in Holmfirth. And the last one is called Meg of the Woods, which is a title I absolutely love. And, right, but in 1910, they concentrate more on the saucy seaside postcards. And they were, like the films, exported for worldwide sale. So he has an international distribution network in place for films in 1910. And now when we look at Hollywood, California, we're going to see that Hollywood doesn't even start making movies until like 1911. So out of Holmfirth, there's an international distribution of movies in the very early 1900s, which is really unbelievable. So the popularity of his films, particularly those featuring a character named Winky, and we're going to look at Winky, you know, he is like the propaganda tool that they have. Right? And that the film surpassed Hollywood in terms of productivity and originality. And it is believed that the company invented film editing with the release in 1899 of The Kiss in the Tunnel. And we're going to look at that one too in a minute. Really quite an amazing little story about the history of filmmaking that I don't think is widely well known. Right? And so I wanted to find out more about James Bamforth. And I love the name, right? It's so alliterative. Like it's like an explosion of a name, right? Bamforth. They don't even know when he died. BFI. Right, and so he's one of a select handful of early British filmmakers, right? And in two brief periods of film activity, 1898 to 1900 and 1913 to 1915, they were responsible for producing a modest but historically significant collection of films. Now let's take a look at this modest but historically significant collection of films. All right, and so the 1898 to 1900, he puts out 14. All right, but then look at this. From 1913 to 1915, modest. Yeah. This list doesn't end. It's unbelievable the number of movies that they put out in this really very short period. This 2-year period. Right? And here's Winky, as I was saying, he's like what not to do. That's what he's out there for. You know, so let's take a closer look here. So he's the son of a painter and decorator, and he starts his photography studio, and then he switches to this magic lantern process like I mentioned, and now we're going to talk about that a little bit further. And so the magic lantern is this device here, and it's been around since the late 1600s, probably in erudite, elite, or educational purposes. Who knows what kind of slides they were showing that early, but it was around for about 100 years or so. And Bamforth here, he is making these slideshows. Bamforth's production of photographic lantern slides was so successful that by 1898, a factory extension at the studio in Holmfirth was built, enabling production on an industrial scale. At first, the company specialized in life model slide sequences, in which simple narratives, usually conveying moral, temperance, and religious themes, were photographed in front of a painted backcloth. The models used were members of the Bamforth family and workforce, and other locals. By the late 1890s, Bamforth production became increasingly dominated by slides intended to accompany popular songs and hymns. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see this, specializing in life model slide sequences with simple narratives, and what the machine is and does, it's essentially just a projector. Well, who needs life modeling? Who are they making these slide sequences for? Who needs to be shown what life is supposed to be, how to act and stuff? But, those who need to be indoctrinated, and a bunch of new people who don't know what to do. Because what are these new people? Who are these mass immigrants? Where are they coming from? These population resets, if we're tying this into that narrative, Right? It's really kind of interesting. So let's take a look at some of these early films. And so now let's take a look at some of these films. Remember now, this is life modeling that's happening here in the late 19th century. All right, and this is the Kiss in the Tunnel, right, which is one of the earliest surviving examples of film editing, right? Life modeling, film editing, Hollywood. And so they establish with the shot of the tunnel coming, right, and the train comes out of the tunnel. And so they get into the tunnel and they cut to the action inside a rail car, man and a woman. All right, and look, he pokes her. He pokes her again. This is life modeling. How to be affectionate. Right? Kiss on the cheek. Unbelievable. Right, I couldn't believe that. And the next one we have is this, it's women's rights. And now this is more like a Monty Python. All right, so it's supposed to be like satirizing women's suffrage, right? So it's these two dudes in drag, right? And they're kissing on each other and stuff, and then they're gonna climb behind this fence, right? And this hooligan boy comes along, and he's spying on them, and he takes their dresses, and he gets this other hooligan kid, right? Early Little Rascals type stuff, and they nail the dresses to this board. I don't really understand what's going on with this. And so they take off, and the old biddies, they're mad, and then they get in front of it. All right, and then the last one has this Winky character. Winky causes a smallpox panic. And here he is. All right, and I think it's interesting too, this very early one, it deals with transformation, like he changes into a bear costume here. And he also has a very early, like, his hair is pointed. Whatever Martin Short can. Martin Short owes this guy some money. Let me tell you, Ed Grimley. So he just essentially wanders around town in this bear costume into this old guy's house. All right, and the old guy gets out, freaking out. All right, there's some Keeblestone cops just happen to be walking by. Here comes the old guy with his ear horn. All right, there's a weird bear loose in my house, and so Keystone cops approach. I love this guy. He pulls up and he's drinking on the job. All right, so he wanders around town. He stumbles into a bar, and there's some patrons in the bar. All right, and he clears everybody out of there, and he scores himself 3 free beers. So this is early Hollywood coming out, All right, and this stuff is getting worldwide distribution. It's shown in Nickelodeon. Look, see, there it is, the Ed Grimley. All right, yeah, Winky. They made, how many did they make of these? I mean, look how many they made. It's unbelievable. Winky, Winky, Winky. Yeah, so I wanted to find out more. What else could I find about Holmfirth here? And this article really doesn't tell me, for as saucy as I think the postcards were. And I looked it up, and it really wasn't worth the payoff. I could not get the sauce from this article, so I figured let me look up Kirklees. All right, and so it's a local government. It's something that was founded relatively recently in the 70s. Their coat of arms is really interesting. All right, it's got the ram horn and the same, the Calvert, the Worm Knight helmet here. And it's interesting, I'm finding less and less of the other styles of helmets these days. They're all seeming to be converted to this. I don't know if that's just me or not. All right, and the Kirklees Council has this shutter-like image that was on the Johns Hopkins School of Studies there, whatever that was, right? And all right, so really this article as well doesn't kind of give me the information I really want. It's more about the modern government and how that stuff was founded. But I scroll through and I get through the geography of it and everything, and it was a little bit interesting, the ethnic breakdown. And, white British 77%, but the next up were Pakistani. And that's going to get more interesting even later on, right? And almost 10% of the population. And the population is something close to 500,000 by this religious breakdown here. Right, but again, not getting what I wanted, but I scroll further down and it says this. It's twinned with 2 different cities. I don't know how that works. What is this, triplets? Right. The sister city is a form of legal or social agreement between town cities, oblasts, prefectures, provinces, etc., right? And they were established after World War II to socially and with also some government ties, city diplomacy, link cities around the world, which is kind of interesting. And so the twin cities here for Kirklees are Besançon in France. And Besançon has a very deep history going back to the Bronze Age, and it's close to Germany, so its flag is like the German colored flag, right? And it has one of these old universities. It's 1423. There's UNESCO's involved, and that they're dictating the past and making sure that it's the UNESCO version that goes forward, right? So really interesting ties back to 2,000 years ago out of Besançon, and it has ties to the Holy Roman Empire and Charlemagne, which has been tying in further. So really interesting stuff that connects to the story as it's coming to me, right? And also this Kastanay in Kazakhstan, right? And it's also very interesting. Also something more modern founded, right? It was founded in 1879. Right, in honor of the Tsar Nicholas II, right? And in 1888, it had more than 3,000 inhabitants. Right, it was a mill town and a brewery. And the Red Army took over World War I era there. But one thing that's sort of interesting about it is its climate. Is in the summer, its July temperature is 30 C, which is hot, right? And it's a winter minus 14.5 C. I mean, that is cold. Who would live in a place that had winters like that? For what? Why settle there? And it's part of Kazakhstan. And it's interesting that the twin city is Kazakhstan, right? But the 10% of the population is Pakistani, which I think is kind of interesting, right? And so I also wanted to kind of, like, Kirk means church, right? I think, if I got that right. I hope I did. So I wanted to see kind of like what Lee meant, right? And it's protective shelter, which I think is interesting in relation to or in context with Kirk, right? Shelter of the church. Right? But it also has a second definition, where it is the insoluble matter that settles from a liquid, especially from wine, sediment. Right, but the dregs. So it's the Church of the Dregs as well, which I think was kind of cool. So, really interesting that this area has this history with the film, and how and cranking out motion pictures, and it has the one of the earliest movie studios, and that Hollywood today in California, that Hollywood is ubiquitous with cinema today, right? And what's Hollywood? It's a neighborhood in Los Angeles. It was incorporated as a municipality in 1903 and consolidated within the city of Los Angeles in 1910. And thereafter is when the film industry comes in. So after what was happening in Brimfirth, right? And I love the early history here. It's so visual, so Hollywood. This one adobe hut standing on this desert hill. But soon, within 13 years, an agricultural community flourishes there. Right? And then it says this: Whitley had already started over 100 towns across the western United States. Like, what just happened here? An agricultural community to Whitney establishing over 100 towns, right? Whitney arranged to buy 480 acres from this E.C. Hurd, right? And they agreed on a price. Like, who is this Whitney guy? Whitley guy. Right? H.J. Whitley. The father of Hollywood. There he is. Right? Born October 7th, 1847 in Canada. Right? But he becomes a naturalized U.S. citizen. And I love how easy it is for these people. Look at him. Now, he moves to Chicago, and he opens a hardware store and candy store. But then he becomes interested in land development and is elected to the board of directors of the Chicago Rock Island Railroad. Of course he's a board of directors for a railroad, right? Why wouldn't he be? Because they all are. As this show proves time and again. They all, and banks. He becomes president of a bank, too. Don't you worry. Whitley's president of a bank, too. And he just develops an interest in these things and is immediately successful at them. And so he was a friend of Roosevelt's. He was at the land run of 1889 in Oklahoma, where he claims property. He builds the first brick block building. He's the first governor of Oklahoma. And he builds towns all along the Rock Island Railroad line: Oklahoma City, El Reno, Chickasaw, Enid, Medford, right? And he persuades Congress to create a capital for Oklahoma in Guthrie, right? And it says it founded over 140 towns. You want to talk about, I don't know, it's like a Johnny Appleseed kind of thing, I guess. I don't know what's the metaphor I'm looking for here, but, here it is banking. He becomes president of a bank. Right? And he moves out to California in the mid-1880s. Where he develops and builds a Hollywood hotel and a bank. Right? And the Hollywood sign, which was originally Hollywood Land. Right? Really sort of amazing story to the beginning of Hollywood here. That, I don't necessarily think this is a well-known, well-publicized story. Right? And he had really amazing kind of personality, this H.J. Whitley. But it says right away he shares the plans for his new town with General Harrison Gray Otis. And now Harrison Gray Otis is publisher of the Los Angeles Times and a military man, right? Which I think is amazing that this real estate mogul would found the town and entrust his plans right away to this military newspaper publisher. So connecting ties to the propaganda aspect of it, which, of course, newspaper is the form of propaganda, right? It's only natural that it would, settle into this Hollywood thing where the film industry is about to come in, 1910. All right, so motion picture companies are starting to set themselves up in Hollywood now, and what they're doing is they're escaping Thomas Edison's patents. Because in California, the patent laws aren't applicable. Right? And so he convinces New Jersey filmmaker David Horsley to come over. Now, Horsley has started this company called Centaur. And I think it's interesting that the one of the earliest film companies in America is called Centaur. You know, when you're trying to tie this thing into the ancient Roman and Greek religions and things like that. I'm sure there's more to be done there, and it's not a coincidence, right? And I looked into centaurs, really, and I couldn't really make a solid connection to, you know, a metaphor with filmmaking and stuff like that. You know, other than connections to like Homer and mythology and things like that, you know, which are so important to Hollywood. We're going to get back to that in a second, too. Oh, I'll just do it now. All right, because also, like with Kirk Lee's, you know, it got its name in the 70s. They voted on it because it's the mythological home of, or it's rather the mythological burial place of Robin Hood. And how many times has Hollywood made a Robin Hood movie? You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. And so he brings a Centaur company, and they open this Nestor Studios. Right? And I also looked up Nestor. Where is he? All right, and it's interesting that Nestor is the grandson of Poseidon, right? And see, I'm really kind of and just to, you know, connect it further to like Holmfirth and stuff. Like Holmfirth has a history of flooding. I think that's also an interesting connection and dot to be connected to the story. You know, now you're bringing the movies. Film studios come out of here. The first film studios in the U.S. are named after sort of Greek gods. This Nestor is the grandson of Poseidon. You know, first film studio in Hollywood, Nestor. You know, so super fascinating early connections to Hollywood, and you know, and I'm going to be tying this further in it with the continuation of Master of Reality and spectroscopy and stuff in the new year. But I thought this was really kind of a fun video. There's a lot more to be done with this, and I'm sure I'll get back to it because, you know, the idea of motion pictures and movies and what they do and how they can be used to brainwash us and so forth is, you know, is a major theme. But just to top this one off with a nice little cherry, there's also a Hollywood, Maryland, right? And I discovered this when I was looking for my when I was doing my Hair of the God episode, you know, when I was playing around. Let's see if they're still there. Yeah, they're still there. Right? Where did it go? There it is. So as you zoom in on Hollywood, right, it's right next to California. So there's a Hollywood, California, right in Maryland, right, which I think is unbelievable. And so let's take a look at Hollywood real quick. And again, I found this. This has been in my pocket since, you know, whenever I did that Hair of the God video, like I said. Right, so it's an unincorporated community in St. Mary's County, right? It was named in 1867 when store owner required the name for the post office. And so he was inspired by the holly tree that was out front, so he called the post office Hollywood. Right? And it has distinctive landmarks. It's the congregation of St. John Francis Regis Catholic Church was there, which was founded in 1690. Right? And the town was the home for the recently demolished manor house Resurrection Manor, which was thought to have been built in 1640 by Thomas Cornwallis, one of the very first settlers in Maryland, you know, whose grandson was Lord Cornwallis, who surrendered to Washington. You know, again, how does this never raise any flags? I don't know. All right, but here from the very beginning, comes over on the Ark or the Dove, one of them, and, you know, unbelievable that town can trace its origins that far back to the very beginning of Maryland. All right, and also, Socks the cat is buried there. Right, but where's the economy? Here it is. All right, but not only all of that, right? There's an industrial park where corporations such as Northrop Grumman have branch offices. Northrop Grumman, aerospace and defense technology. Right, operating income of $3 billion a year, revenue of $30 billion a year. Offices in Hollywood. And you talk about the connections to the psychological warfare that is propaganda, that is cinema and movies and television and newspapers and any radio and anything else. And its ties to government and military and so forth. The connections are there to be made. It's unbelievable. So, anyway, yeah. Thank Mr. Havisham for this one. I was really under the weather for more than the last week, and I didn't think I was going to get one out for the holidays, so I'm happy I did, and I want to wish everybody out there, a happy holiday, and we're going to pick it up again in the new year, back with Master of Reality, like I said, and more with Baltimore and the Jubilee. It's going to be a fun year, and so until the next one, cheers, guys.